Okay, everyone, welcome back. This is the final lecture video for Race, Crime, and Justice. As you can see, there's no note thing anywhere, but we're just diving right in because week 8, we have our final discussion board, the final exam, and the Dropbox for the Court of Public Opinion. Um, Obviously, last week, what can we do? What can you do? Was kind of the focus of this week is what can you do? Last week was what can we do? What now? The future. And so, obviously, our discussion board, because I want the focus to be on this final exam, because this is the only test for the entire class, as well as your Court of Public Opinion project, I wanted to make sure that you were able to focus. So, just real quickly going over the discussion board. What change would you like to see in society as a whole? I want this class to end on a positive note. So, what change do you want to see in the world and why? And how do we make that change happen? And of course, that's connected to the two outside readings for this week. Both come from the UN. One is a larger document, the International Declaration of Human Rights, and then the shorter one is the UN Fight Racism campaign that they've been doing and they're continuing to do, and we'll talk about that briefly. Um, but just real quickly, want to give you a chance to see this. Okay, there we go. I was gonna say that scared me that it didn't show up. So because we haven't had a test this entire semester, all of these questions come from the book in one way, shape, or form. Um, so and things we've talked about in the lecture. So the exam is broken down into several sections. Part 1 is definitions. It's worth a total of 100 points. There are 50 prompts and 50 answers. Um, so you just match. That's the whole point. We have a short answer section. Yes, you just got a hint of at least 2 answers to the previous parts because the answers are correct on my side. And then there's an essay section where you will have to choose one of these 8 essay prompts that you need to write about. And that's it. And then there's a bonus point section. But anyway, so that is the main focus of this week, as well as please make sure that you upload your Court of Public Opinion projects here. This is a discussion board type thing. I've said this before, but please share your files for your project. At least one visual and an audio of your voice talking about your argument for a character. I encourage everyone to respond to everyone. Your response should be I agree or I disagree so that we can see if you've convinced anyone. It's not a I really like what you did there or I don't think that's an accurate. You can add to that, but the main focus I want to see is the agree and disagree. Um, if you need help with the recording process, please reach out to me ASAP so I can help coordinate that. If you're having a file size limit upload everything to your EC3 OneDrive and include a link here. So that's an important, just little extra piece there. But without further ado, let's actually talk about the readings for this week. And so I want to start with the short one, easier one first, and that is the UN's Fight Racism um, campaign. And so it is understood not just in this class, not just in America, but in the world as a whole, that there is an issue of bias against other people. And so the UN has put forward a campaign to hashtag fight racism. And that's racism, xenophobia, and intolerance. They are issues. And so they talk about ways that you can get involved. And really, it comes down to talk and advocate, educate and reflect, support, and exercise your rights. And really, these are things that we've already kind of talked about, but it's important to note that this is something that comes from the United Nations. This is something that's not just, one random textbook or one random teacher in a community college in Pennsylvania. No, this is a conversation elsewhere. This is a conversation everywhere. And honestly, the talk and advocate is very big, especially because, as we've seen all the way back in chapter 2, the media and the way our depictions are shown leads to reinforcement of these negative stereotypes. So avoid being silent. If you see something going on, call it out. I'm not saying put yourself in risk, but call it out, report it, and hate speech, both in real life and if you're in online spaces and you see that kind of stuff. Start conversations, which means to engage in open and constructive discussions. I know this is especially hard when certain groups don't want to engage in a constructive discussion, but be open to that. Try to remain emotionally neutral and calm as you talk about these problems, and that if you don't if you don't rise up and have these strong emotional claims, it's harder for an opposition to break down the argument, because then they have to look at the logic rather than the emotions behind it. But that starting conversations is also part of educating. Change the narrative is we need to work together collectively to take control of what is being said. We need to share stories of people who fought against racism, people who have unfortunately died at the hands of these kinds of issues. We need to just in general raise awareness of this kind of situation. You're doing right now with this class is educating yourself. We did discuss a lot about racism within the criminal justice system, but continue to educate yourself, but learn with others and teach others. That's kind of a big key. And one of the things that we find for the most part, this is more of a psychology thing, but we do see it in criminal justice. People who are raised in predominantly racist, not just homes, but communities, or have little exposure to people who are outside of their particular race, tend to have some kind of racial biases put into their belief structure. And so teaching them young about acceptance is one of the best ways to fight racism. And this, again, is something that psychology talks about. This is something education talks about. It's the idea that you expose individuals to more of the world. You not and expose is a difficult word in this case, but when you show that there is equality, when you remove the weird barriers that people put up, there's a lot more working together, collaboration. If you can, support is important. Give your time and skill. Volunteer for, you know, any kind of organization that is trying to help with these kinds of movements, as well as if you can, donate to foundations that are designed for this. As always, if you're donating to any kind of charity or anything, make sure that you do your research on them to make sure that they are, in fact, good charities and not just pocketing the money. There are some that are out there that are bad, but for the most part, there are good charities out there. And then obviously exercise your rights. And this is one of those things that's important. It's peaceful protest, freedom of speech and opinion, right to take part in politics. Like, we live in America. You can be involved in politics as much as you want for the most part. There are obviously limits, but you are encouraged to be an active participant in all of this. Share with a group of people that have a similar view set as you do. That's kind of the end of the day. When you're with a group of like-minded people, just remember that even the smallest people can make a change. Erie Community College is a good example of that. The whole city wasn't on board with a community college, but a small group of people fought hard for years to get this to happen. So even the little people can make up a big impact. And then the other document that I want to talk about, and this is kind of I want to leave you the positive side is that, make changes. You can have an impact on these kinds of developments and these things, which is great. But I also want to talk about this because I don't know if I've mentioned it in this class or not, but there is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it is a big deal. Um, for the most part, the Declaration of Human Rights came as a result, the one of the biggest positive influences to come out of the atrocities of World War II. Post World War II, the United Nations gathered together and agreed upon certain guidelines and rules to respect human life so that the human experimentation that went on, conducted by the Nazis in the concentration camps, that would never happen again, or to the best of their ability, never happen again. And it was the idea that everyone has certain rights that they are given because they are human beings. And so this is from the United Nations website. This is the official web page version of this. And the preamble is just like the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. This is how we have come about. This is the plan. This is what we are doing. And then we get into the actual articles of the Declaration of Human Rights. And so the very first one, and kind of where I wanted to get into some of these, is all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. So right off the bat, we are starting this with all humans are born equal in dignity and rights. Period. No one should be born into servitude. No one person should have more rights or dignity than another. Everyone is the same. Article 2, everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of the political, jurisdictional, or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any other limitation of sovereignty. And I know that got wordy, and I know not everybody probably knows what all that means, but it is making a very, very bold claim saying that everyone is entitled to all of these things, even countries that don't agree with this, even in places where people may not agree with all of these components. Every person who is a member of the human race that is on the planet Earth is entitled to these rights and freedoms. And this right here, this is part of the reason why international politics has gotten so complicated in recent times, is because we do have this general understanding. There is widespread information available to people about the Declaration of Human Rights, and when human rights are being violated and is brought forward, then the UN, which is a peaceful organization that in theory works really well to govern the world, and it doesn't. It leads to issues of who gets involved and whether or not violence is right. The answer is no. In their mind, violence is never correct. So how do you deal with this? How do you adjust to this? Everybody has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. The slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. No one shall be subject to torture or to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. And if anyone is thinking, wait, this is the Declaration of Human Rights, but didn't the U.S. in Guantanamo Bay and other such locations for quite a while subject torture and inhumane, degrading treatment or punishment? Yes. And that comes down to a more complicated issue of who signed this Declaration of Human Rights. Um, but anyway, everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. All are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. These are all things we've talked about. Everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights granted him by the Constitution or by law. This is the if you bring a case forward, we will act or we should act. Uh, yeah, this goes on in a good way. And that's kind of what I wanted to get at with this is that the Declaration of Human Rights is the reason that we are I wouldn't say it's the reason, but it is part of the reason why so many people are very um, careful and guarded and involved with other people because according to this we should be. And yeah, we should all have the same rights. And that's kind of the point, right? Sorry, I know this is kind of a rambling uh, last lecture, but it's difficult to talk about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and how we've seen some of these things play out both within this class and in our discussions and in other classes and other parts of our world that we experience daily. This is a wonderful doctrine to believe in that everyone is equal, but we don't always see that, or we don't always experience that in our own lives. And so, taking the advice of the UN as well with fight racism, fight xenophobia, let's fight all those negative issues, which include homophobia, transphobia. Uh, the idea here is that what can we do as individuals? I would argue that the best thing you can do is remember this the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that everyone has equal dignity and rights to life as a human, whether you agree with them or not. Everybody has the right to dignity and life. Maybe if we just believed that a little bit more, maybe we'd have less issues, less arguments, less wars. Keep that in mind and put forward positive change. Have the tough conversations. Don't be afraid to talk to other people about this stuff. Education is key. That's a belief in several corrections beliefs, but it's also true in a lot of other areas. Education is key. Well, on that kind of somber note, it wasn't super positive, but it wasn't super negative. Yeah, make sure that you are completing your final exam and you are submitting your Court of Public Opinions assignment and your final discussion board. And if this is the last class you have with me, thank you very much for, uh, taking classes with me. If this is not your last class, I look forward to seeing you in the next class. But anyway, thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful day, night, week, weekend, fourth meal, midnight, third shift, whatever it may be that you're watching this. Have a good day, everyone.